Hello, everybody. This is Still Rose's podcast. This podcast was created for women by women to elevate women's voices. I'm very excited to introduce all of you today to our guest. Today we have with us Mekdela Ejigu. She's the author of Plus Size and memoir of pop culture, fat phobia, and social change. She's also a beauty justice activist and body diversity advocate. She has a feminist studies pre-law BA and a public policy MA graduate with over a decade of community organizing, policy advocacy, and communications experience. She also worked with the Ethiopian Diaspora Fellowship in Los Angeles. She promoted leadership and creative storytelling while training Ethiopian Americans to work for partner organizations in Ethiopia. Mekdela, wow is like an understatement. And also welcome to the show. It's amazing to talk with you because you're doing so much and you're giving back so much. I read about you in advance and I'm very honored that you chose this podcast to come and talk and introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm really enjoying talking to you too.
So Mekdela, why don't you take a moment, introduce yourself to the listeners, and maybe talk a little bit about how you decided to author your memoir, the memoir of pop culture, and even, your policy work, anywhere you want to go. The listeners are ready for you.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Mekdela, and I am the author of Plus Size, a memoir of pop culture, fat phobia, and social change. I am also like a lifelong advocate and activist, including beauty justice activist. But I've noticed that all systems of oppression are connected. So it all kind of overlaps. And how I came about writing my book is that I was a community organizer in communities of color in Los Angeles right before Trump was elected in 2016. And it was just complete and utter chaos. We were running around like chickens with their heads cut off, and I was just sent into free fall. And so in order to like kind of ground myself, to like find something that I could like hold on to, like something concrete to stabilize myself, I started writing a blog. And this blog, I just kind of like was sorting out my thoughts and my memories and experiences, and it went all over the place, right? But it just started with my childhood, and it became about the media that I had consumed throughout my life and how it ended up mirroring what was happening to me. And I realized that there was a connection, and so that's what inspired me to compile and create them.
It's interesting. How you phrase that up. So I want to circle on a couple things. I think all minorities and all of us, those of us who are in, mixed marriages and everything, we're all very nervous during that time. And even in the recent time, it's very hard to describe it. And honestly, I'm like tip of the iceberg because it's just, I'm just interracial marriage. But for me to witness the other side, like firsthand, was not shocking because when we started dating, that was more of the shock. And I actually I want to talk about that for a minute because I know that you also are well versed in critical race theory too. So I'll talk about this for a second. When I started dating my husband, and I'm going to admit this, and I feel so stupid, but I actually came into the relationship and was like, no, but like racism isn't a thing anymore, right? And he was like, we met in 2010. He was like, what are you talking about? And he actually got, and I feel really stupid. Honestly, I feel stupid saying it because that is like such an example of the bubble.
Yeah.
And because I obviously wouldn't know. There's no way I would know. There's no way I would ever witness it. There's no way I'm going to pay attention to it. I had no idea. The only time that I started to actually see things was when we would go out together, and I started to see how people reacted. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Where we wouldn't get served at places. We were getting pulled over like consistently, and I was getting pulled out of the car and they were basically being like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "That's my boyfriend. Like, what are you talking about?" Like, there was these consistent moments of like, "Oh my God, like Jenny, like open your eyes," kind of thing. And the part that was more not shocking, but it became more of a wow, like, you know, the Caucasian race or the white race, the, other people, like we're not seeing these things, and we're turning a blind eye to all of this stuff. We're turning a blind eye to it. And the part that was like disturbing for me was like my own family being like, "What are you talking about? Like, you're crazy. Like, no, this is in your head, or no, you're overreacting." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're gaslighting." I was like, "Oh my God." And it was like this whole big mind blowing like thing. So that in itself, like I know, I know that time was very, very frightening for a lot of folks. So I want to commend you on finding something tangible like your blog to channel everything into. And then from your blog being like, I have something here that can help other people.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I've never written something like I've never written anything, period. I mean, I'm working on something right now, but I mean, how did it feel to pull together your thoughts in that way? Because this obviously is something very personal, and then to put it into paper. I mean, how did you know like what to focus in on? Like, how did you take away from your blog and decide like these are my main points? And I haven't read your book yet, so I'm asking the question very cold.
So I realized that it told a story, like the media that I had consumed and how they kind of mirrored my lived experiences throughout my life, like over time. I realized that it told a story. And so I wrote that book to tell that story. And it's not linear, right? It's non-linear. It kind of jumps around in terms of time
Mm-hmm.
and my life. But it really I feel like it really illuminates how systems of oppression, racism, sexism, classism, ableism, capitalism, colonialism, how they operate in the world, how they shape our lives, and how, at least the media during the time I was raised, um, kind of echoed that. It kind of gave it a platform for which people would internalize those things and then become the very people enforcing these systems in their personal lives. And you could say that is true for the media today as well. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's promoting, and it's not just the media. There's other institutions, the medical industrial complex, the beauty industrial complex, even the school system, there's a lot of other institutions that also uphold these systems in their ways.
I can speak to the medical quite a bit because of the work
Yeah.
that I do. And it's very interesting, again, to see the other side of the curtain because I work in marketing and communications. And so I know what goes into the thought process for we're going to launch this product. How are we going to launch this product? Like, what are we going to do? Are we going to launch this? Like, and I understand like the backdrop to a lot of these things. So when I do see stuff playing out and I see commercials or I see like, and I see how the commercials are set up, my job on my side of the fence is to create this content, for these large organizations. And so when I see the targeted, the very targeted and very specific things that are put out there, you can tell, you can very definitively see, and I don't know if it's because now we're all just much more aware of it, but you can see the agenda pushing. And you can see that there is a reason we want you need to see this, like we're pushing this in your face. I see it in my children's TV shows. It's the wildest thing I've ever seen in my life. But we'll watch, like, we don't always screen everything, like it's, I'm not going to spend hours a day pre-screening shows that the kids are watching, but we're always within the vicinity and painfully aware of like the media images that are being pushed to my children. Because when I was growing up, and I'll go more towards like the fat phobia, like that side of the fence, when I was growing up, the image was always like, the very slim, tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, fairy princess. That's all you got.
Yeah.
And that's never been me. I'm tall, but I am not thin. And so when I was growing up, I remember like I saw a post recently actually that was saying like, no wonder why all of us have had like eating disorders and all this crazy stuff, because they showed images of like, it was like Bridget Jones's Diary. There was like a Beyonce, like there was a bunch of them. And it was like, we were told that these people are fat. And then they showed pictures and I'm like, oh my God, by no means were any of these women overweight. But the storylines and the plots around all these women were like, oh, look, she gained, 5 pounds, or oh, look, this, like, and it was a constant, like, oh, you need to look like this certain way. Like, this is what's being funneled to you. So for a very long time, I felt completely out of place, because by the time I was 11 or 12 years old, I was like 5'6", and I think I weighed like 140 pounds. I was like towering over everyone in my grammar school. And I felt like there was something wrong with me. And I was like, oh, like I'm like a freak, and it's that kind of messaging that, I'm very aware of, and I try really hard to teach my children differently. And while they're seeing all these images before they get inundated when they become teenagers, I'm trying to address it now.
That's very good. Yeah, they're lucky to have you.
um, so a little bit more on your book. So it's Pop Culture, Fat Phobia, and Social Change. So did you use social media in your study of all this? Like, did you pull through elements of like, because social media is like a huge thing where, I mean, everyone's getting their information from social media, and like even health information, like everything's coming off of social media now. So is that where you started to pull through like through lines for everything and to see like patterns of information?
What's really interesting is that because I was so interested in these topics, and also because it was like directly impacting my life, I kind of naturally sort of gravitated towards like looking up information, reading up on these topics, and I ended up, I guess the research kind of stuck in my brain, because when I was writing this, I literally I didn't even have to search for it. I just remembered off of the back of my head, like what studies and articles and research that I read in the past and that I was able to cite. And it just shows how education works, right? Like it's not just a one and done. You read these things and then you understand what they're saying, and then you kind of like internalize it. You incorporate it into your viewpoints, or at least that's the goal. And that's kind of what happened to me. So it was like I didn't even have to really seek out, because I just remembered what I had seen in my own like studies. And yeah, that's what I hope for readers too, that they're able to like digest and just internalize it and into their lives.
I have to tell you, because that's the way that you retain the information, the book it's I'm very excited to read the book, because that alone, like I can understand that. I love reading. I don't get to do it quite as much as I used to. But now, because I read so much when I was younger, and I mean, I started, obviously kid stuff when I was a kid, but the older I got, the more I was like, I need to expand my knowledge. I can't just know this one thing. I need to really understand, X, Y, and Z. I would pick up like just topics, and I was like, you know what, like for example, like at one point I was like, I was born and raised Catholic, but I'm not practicing. So I was like, oh, well, like let me just pick up this book on the Vatican. I don't know anything about this, let me look it up. And I was like totally shocked, because this book that I picked up was not about like, traditions and Catholicism. It was about like the history of the Vatican, which I was very surprised to read that, like, the Pope used to have concubines and like all this stuff. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting, because that means that the church has like decided that we're going to just kind of go, pretend like that didn't happen. And, like it's very interesting. So I'm a really big advocate of like, look it up, research it. Don't just take something at face value. Put the time and effort into educating yourself. I've seen a lot of women on not Instagram, excuse me, on LinkedIn is the platform that I'll always go to for like stuff and just reading information. And some of the women that I follow have said that. They're like, don't ask me to educate you. Educate yourself. Here's some resources. Go look it up. Like, figure it out. Because the whole point is like what you said, if this is something of value to you, you're going to read about it. You're going to read that article, read that book, or whatever it is. You're going to retain it. And then that's going to be imprinted with you. And like, just like how this book came together, this was like all these things that you were already interested in. And then you were able to produce this book. And this book is, I'm sure, having an impact on everyone who touches it.
Definitely. Yeah. One of my favorite things is reading reviews, and people talk about learning so much, even though it's a very like compact, not very, it's a very quick book, under 100 pages, but they learn so much and they enjoy it. It's interesting for them. And they take away so much from it too.
Um, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to read about it. So what else are you doing right now? So you wrote the book. Is there outside of the book? I mean, is there a book two, or is there something else that you think that from the book you'd like to communicate this message to the listeners today? Is there like a topic you think that would be really important for you to speak on?
Definitely. I am kind of marinating in the back of my head a book two, and the topic would be on healing my inner child, because I definitely touched on inner child in the book. Some of my essays were written from her perspective, because it kind of charts, the formation of my identity and my mind from very young. And, even having been in therapy, there's just one quote from one of the therapists that I used to work with. And she said, childhood is the air we breathe for the rest of our lives. And I do touch on that in the book. And I kind of want to like expand on that in another book. But it's so true. Like the more I live, the more I realize like how much, and it makes sense because our childhood is when we first, our brains are the most malleable, right? When we're learning about the world and our place in it and ourselves, and especially if you have traumatic experiences from that time, it can really like make or break you. It can really like get stuck in your subconscious, your psyche, and then literally shape every single experience you have afterwards. Um, there's even science about that, like ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, about how traumatic childhood experiences lead to, or they're more likely to lead to, physical and mental health diseases later on in life as an adult, because it's still impacting you throughout your life. But of course, it's not all doom and gloom. Like there's ways to heal, right? There's ways to heal that, you know, to get your life and yourself back. And that's where the healing the inner child comes in. And so it's a very fascinating topic. But on a more positive note, there's also like research on like how making your inner child happy can lead you to fall in love with someone. It could just make you a happier person, and a happier person in general. Like just being in touch with your inner child and what you used to love is kind of the key to happiness as well. Like for example, it would be like maybe grown women who really wanted to play with Barbies when they were younger, or even maybe grown men or non binary people who were not assigned female at birth, who really wanted to play with Barbies or toys that are associated with girls as a child, but they weren't allowed to,
Mm-hmm.
either because they couldn't afford them or their parents
Like
were putting
weren't
them into
allowed.
gender
Yeah.
standards. Exactly. So as an adult, say like giving a gift, gifting that person like a Barbie doll, could really make them happy, and it could really make their inner child happy and heal something that was, previously missing or that was hurt, and there was this one article. I don't know if it's scientific exactly, but they said that that's like a way to get somebody to fall in love. Like if you want someone to fall in love with you, one of the best ways to do that is to give them something that they didn't get to have in childhood that they really wanted, or to remind them somehow of their childhood. Obviously, like a good or like
Mm-hmm.
happy aspect of their childhood, not a traumatic one. And somebody commented, and I don't know if this is true. It could just be a wacky rumor, but it really amused me. They were like, That's what Meghan Markle did. Meghan Markle wore Princess Diana's perfume on her first date with Harry. And I'm like, that's a perfect example. Or I'm sorry, Megan Sussex.
You know what? I will say, perhaps it was that in combination with the fact that she also is not trying to grab the spotlight. I did pay attention a little bit there, and Harry was never one for the spotlight. And Megan embodied a lot of that. And I think that's what it was. And I wanted to add to what you're saying because you're absolutely spot on. And what you can expand on it a little bit more past like the physical, like a present. And it's also maybe you're bringing safety and peace to somebody that had a really tumultuous life and was just seeking out some peace in their life, and you're the person who brought it to them, and that's really going to fill them up from like that childhood, and it addresses those childhood needs. If you are, and I've said this on other podcast episodes, if you're feeling really unfulfilled in your life, and you are and you feel like, because I 40s is like the year, like the age, right, where we all like re-examine ourselves, and and I've noticed that I've seen people, myself and everybody, going into their 40s, and I'm like, oh, we all kind of did it. We all had to re-examine our lives. And one of the things that like I've noticed, and I knew for myself, was I started a couple years back where I was getting like, I'm feeling stuck. I'm feeling like I went down this whole path of corporate because I felt like I needed to go that path, or I should go that path because that's the success and that's the money and that's where everything is. And I got to a certain point and I was like, oh my God, I feel like my soul is being sucked out of my body. I
Exactly.
was like, I'm doing this now and I'm like really not happy because I'm not spending time with my family. And my priority is like working 15 hours a day. I'm like, this sucks. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, and I went through this whole period of almost like rediscovering Jenny. And it sounds so like hippy dippy, but like it's legitimately like this is a legitimate practice, and it completely
Right.
changed my life. And I went through this whole like online virtual course. I was doing other stuff. We were doing business things too, but we also talked about this part. And I think I might have told you in our intro call, I did um this meditation that, and because I meditate every day too. So I when I was learning to meditate through this course, the meditation was addressing your younger selves. And so it was like a 30-minute guided meditation, and you address like your child, and then you address like teen or mid 20, whatever like intervals you felt like were necessary. When I addressed like child Jenny, I was like sobbing, like, because like you go so far and you're like, oh yeah, like I've accomplished a lot. I have the money, I have the house, like I have the cars. None of that actually matters. Like that's all we've created, this whole like society where you need these hot cars, you need this big house, you need to go on vacations, and now social media is like taking you even further. You need to be showered with flowers, and you need this and you need that. You don't actually need any of it. The real root of your happiness is going to come from yourself, and it's going to come from inside. So if you're broken because you never really addressed your childhood and you didn't acknowledge all these times in your life that you've gone through, and you're not embracing it and acknowledging it and paying homage to it, then that's where you're going to feel broken. And that's when you're going to start feeling disjointed and disconnected. And people will live their whole lives with this disconnection and continuing on down a path of like, oh, I should do this, I should be doing that. And they're not really addressing that inner turmoil. And then they die. Like, and that's it. Like, we only really, well, I don't know if I believe it's only one shot at this, but like, let's say we only get one shot at this. Like, let's do it right. Let's address that inner child and that, what you've gone through, and bring it to the next level. When I did that, I also remembered how much I used to like being creative. I hadn't been creative in years. Like, I mean, I used to I did creative writing all the time when I was a kid, all the way up through high school. I did it until my parents divorced. And then Broken Jenny, like, just tossed it out the window and just stopped. And that's where, like, and it, the whole journey I went through brought me to this podcast, and it brought me to being, a podcast host, and it brought me to developing it and launching it and wanting to do all this. And that's why I'm always like, I will get on a soapbox and I will talk about it for forever, because I'm like, this is really crucial. Like, so many of us are disconnected and disjointed because we're not addressing these inner things. We were told growing up to just kind of sweep it under the rug. and to like keep your head down and keep moving forward. And, mental health wasn't a thing for our parents. Like they didn't address, I don't know about your parents, but my parents weren't like real big on like, oh yeah, mental health, make sure you guys are okay. That wasn't a thing when I was growing up. So now it needs to be, and we need to be paying attention to this.
I'm so glad you brought that up, about, being a woman in her 40s and, starting to realize how your inner child wounds have been still kind of present all along, and working
Mhm.
through that. One of my, actually, maybe the favorite show I have right now that's still airing is called Yellow Jackets. And it's about that pretty much. It's a dramatization of that. It's a split show. So like half of the time of the show is spent in modern day, right? In 2021 to 2025, depending on the season. And the main cast are women in their 40s. And these women are still living the aftermath of what happened to them when they were teen girls.
Mhm.
They were on a very competitive high school soccer team, and they were flying to a competition, and they got into a plane crash, and they landed in the wilderness in the middle of nowhere, and they had to survive there in the wild for 19 months.
Oh God.
Yeah, yeah. And so the first episode starts out with the 40-year-old women contending with reporters that are still like at their throats, trying to get the whole story, the scoop of what really what really went on out there, because there was a lot of rumors about cannibalism and things that they had to do in order to survive.
Mhm.
But the 40-year-old women are like, nope, like they have like a pact that they're not going to say anything to the press. And you see them just trying to live their lives, but they're still literally and metaphorically haunted by what happened in the woods and what they did. And so the show, like, after we see them in the present day, the show flashes back to when they were teenagers, from the plane crash and through the 19 months. And it kind of like builds that story of like what happened out there. And then we see them, and then we go back to seeing them dealing with the aftermath 20 years later. And so there's this kind of continuity between the teenage girl and the woman that she becomes, right?
Mhm.
So we see the connection, the continuity, and how, you know, that traumatic experience is ultimately shaping their lives,
Yeah.
20 years later as women. And so I feel like it is really about trauma and healing. Also, it's like a Lord of the Flies situation where it's about like the inherent brutality and viciousness and violent nature of human beings, especially in like survival situations. But also kind of like your past coming back to haunt you, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
literal supernatural element where there was something in the woods with them that was stalking them, and it might have caught up to them in civilization. And so it's
Oh, that's
really good.
interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
Is that on Netflix? Like, can you give me more? Like, where is that? Where's that streaming?
The first season is on Netflix,
Okay, I'm gonna
but
check it
the
out.
whole, like, there's three seasons at this point. They're in the middle of airing the third season, and that's on Fridays at 8 p.m. on Paramount Plus and Showtime online. And then I think
Okay.
it's on Showtime if you have cable, Sundays at sometime in the night.
I'm gonna check it out when I can. I have. It's so funny. Like every time I talk with a new guest, I get like a new recommendation. I have like a notebook full of like I need like a couple of weeks of Jenny time where no
Yeah.
one's gonna bother me, so I can read all these books and like do all these things. Because it's like, I mean, whenever someone comes on the podcast, you guys always give me like great recommendations for things. Um, no, I do. I've always known, I was very interested in psychology when I was growing up, and and mental health disorders unfortunately were rampant in my family, but not doing anything about it, just medicating.
Mhm.
And so I think it's important to really address the root cause and to be able to get past it. And and I'll use an example too of like anxiety. I have terrible anxiety. I was sharing this with my cousin the other day that I I have anxiety when I leave my house. Like when I have to go drive far distances by myself, I get anxious about that. And that was like a new thing that happened in the last couple of years. I've never had that problem before. And so I self-talk myself through it. And I think there's a large part of once you do the work to understand yourself and to understand where there has been trauma or to understand like where things might have gone wrong, then you can take the next step and saying like, well, actually, I know how to address these things as they come up because it never actually goes away. The reality of it is we do go through these things in our life. You recognize it, you honor it, understand like it did happen. I went through this thing. It doesn't even have to be that traumatic, to be perfectly honest with you. It could be anything that impacts your life. And then you move on from there. The trick is when you do have the trigger again and you start to have your trigger response is to be able to say, I actually know what this is. And so I get anxiety when I'm leaving the house. When I have to leave my kids and my husband, I get anxiety about it. I'm like, I'm leaving my nest. I'm leaving my children. And I immediately start in my head. Like I've woken up like from like, so my most recent trip that I had to take was for work. And I had to get up like in the middle of the night to go, do something, do a meeting. And I was driving really far out of state. And so, well, one, I started recording a podcast episode on the drive because I was like, I'm so anxious. Like, let me just talk this out to my listeners. So that's kind of that's what I did. Privately in my head, I will talk to myself and be like, all right, Jenny, you're not actually in any danger, not really anxious right now. This is just like your mind and this and that. And you know that this isn't real and it's okay. You can get through this. And it's a matter of understanding and recognizing yourself. And then like you can move forward from there. And it sounds super simple. And it's like, no, it can't be that. But it is. Once you do the work to get through everything and you can recognize like, why do I have anxiety or why am I feeling like this? Or, I haven't addressed certain things, like you can then move forward from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, exactly. And you think, like you said, you think even if you happen to be successful, you get married, have kids, have a nice house and car, you think you're past it. You think you don't have to worry about that anymore. But, as you said, you do because it catches up to you and
Yeah,
you have to address it.
exactly. And one thing I want to talk with you too about before our session is done, um, because we talked about the inner child, and I touched a little bit on that I was raised Catholic, but I don't really practice anymore. Um, the spirituality element of our lives. And because I very deeply know that there is something bigger and grander out there, that I'm very, very well aware of it. I, being Catholic, it's very interesting. There's a lot of rules when you're Catholic, like lots of them. And one of the things that, like, you're basically told, like, this is it. This is the only way. This is it. Everyone else is incorrect. This is it. And as I mentioned, when I had read that book on the Vatican, when I started doing my own research on things, I realized how much human hands had manipulated the story. And I use this at work too. I always say, like, whenever human hands have touched something, then there's room for error, whatever it is, and it has to go to editorial. That's work, right? But in life, I'm like, well, if human hands have touched that, that means somebody had an opinion and they
Yeah,
shaped this to be
exactly.
what they wanted this to be.
Exactly.
So you really have to, for your spirituality, think to yourself about like, well, what's the roots here? What am I going to get back to? Because there's no way that there's only one religion. There's no way.
Right.
It's not possible. There's so many beautiful religions out there. I mean, just beautiful, beautiful customs and traditions that really lift and raise the spirit that are not Catholic. And I'm like, how could these beautiful these beautiful religions be, condemned just because they're not like going to this one particular church or, following these one particular rules? My mother, by the way, if she ever hears this episode, will be very upset with me. Like, she'll be very mad that I'm even talking like this. But to me, spirituality is really like it's from within. And it's something that connects you. For me, I call it the universe, the grander universe, and it's energies and it's an exchange of energy. And that's really, to me, like that's the root here. And that's something that I've practiced now for like 3 years. And I've done it through meditation. I've done it through like a lot of different practices, but that's actually what I lean more into. And I'm going to be honest with you. As soon as I started leaning more into my spirituality and these practices of meditation and affirmations and really, really like the chakras and all this stuff, it just makes so much sense. It's like the light bulb has come on, if you will.
It's so funny when you said that the power generator
I saw it.
started in
The
my
light bulb literally came on. I know.
yeah,
It
right.
kind of freaked me out a little bit. I'm like, oh, did I just illuminate her?
So funny. But yeah, no, thank you so much for telling me this. And I love hearing from, women in a different generation from me. As you mentioned that you're in your 40s.
Mm,
And like you were kind of like in the same strain that you were saying, like I think the reason, especially women, I mean people generally, but especially women in their 40s and onwards, but sometimes even like any woman over 25, right? Like if, there's this idea like if you're too old for Leonardo DiCaprio to date you, your life is over basically. And so and
oh
that's
my
the
God.
idea. There is this very terrible misogynist idea that
Hmm.
a woman's prime or women only matter when they're in their
Oh,
early 20s or
yeah,
even
the
40s.
childbearing years, is that what you're, yeah, it's such a
Yeah,
patriarchal thing to say because it's like,
absolutely.
that's your value, is that you
And
have to be
beauty.
young, fresh, and be able to produce lives. That's it.
Exactly. And it's tied to our beauty standards, which are very
Hmm.
much like you said in the beginning, which is what I saw from the media growing up. You have to be, white,
Oh,
very
forget, oh,
thin.
there was no representation at all. Like
Exactly.
none.
Very thin, straight hair, and also young. Like you had to
Yeah,
be in your teens or early 20s. That is
that was
beautiful.
it.
And so people have this idea, especially, for aging women, especially, but people in general, they kind of just like give up on themselves after a while. They think that, their lives, your life ends at 30
Hmm.
and, you're just kind of cruising after that. And so, and beauty standards are part of what is making people feel that way. And so that's another thing that I love about Yellow Jackets and the representation. It stars, women in their 40s and also, their teenage counterparts who are being played by teenage actresses, of course. But it shows you that, it kind of like promotes the idea of like life doesn't end at 30,
No. It's so crazy because you're absolutely right, by the way. Like the whole, I mean, I remember as I like got older. First of all, I'll say this. I met my husband when I was 26, and I remember at that point, I actually had already felt like I was getting too old.
Right?
And I was
Yeah.
like, I need to get married. Oh my God. The clock is ticking. If I don't get married now and have kids in 2 years, like I don't want to be like an old mom. So I got to make sure that I got to get married quick. Well, first of all, my husband was like, no, we're not. Like, like he like put the kibosh on that. He's 9 years older than me. So he was like, no. Like he knew and he had experience already. He already had two kids when we met. And he was like, no, like, no. I learned so much from him. It was like it's astounding just because he was older and able to like really be like, no, like this is nonsense, like really think about this, Jen. But the ageism is there, and I remember being like, my friends were all getting married again, like everyone was married by 25,
Yeah.
everybody. And I was like the last man standing, and because and they were like, why are you like, oh, you don't want to get married? I'm like, well, I'm kind of like focusing on my career. I'm trying to build that, like, so I could, bring something to the table. I don't want to just get married. Like that seems crazy to me. Like I need to be able to stand on my own 2 feet.
Yeah.
And so that was like an anomaly. Now I will say this too, like for ageism, I see now like lots of things on LinkedIn where, the female quotient, that's one of the ones I follow. Like they have like really great stuff that they put out. And they've been putting stuff out, and one of Sarah Jessica Parker just was on a post where she was like talking about how when they had the new series come out, the post, like the older series of Sex in the City, and she was like, the comments were like so horrible to the women about how they looked old and this and that. Oh, you have gray hair now. She's like, well, so does this guy over here, but nobody's talking about this guy's gray hair. Why are they so focused on my gray hair? There's been a lot of women that I've noticed recently and I've talked to that no one's dying. A lot of women are not dyeing their gray hair anymore. Like they're starting to embrace it. And I don't dye my hair. I'm letting it go. I'm like, I'm getting gray hair, but you know what? I earned that gray hair. I've lived half my life at this point. Like, well, not half. I'm almost there, but I've lived almost half my life. Of course, I'm gonna have some gray hair, and I feel distinguished by that. I'm distinguished by, I don't love the wrinkles, but I'm distinguished by this because you know what? I earned all this. I earned all the stretch marks with all these babies that I had. Like, and I'm here to show up as like Jenny Benitez, the person, not like the shell of the human being that the media tried to wrap into this little package and be like, oh, by the way, you're done at 40 and now you have to just take a step back and just not do anything else with yourself. Like, this is the best time I've ever had because I actually truly know myself now. It never, like you get to a certain point in your life and you're like, what? I just figured out who I am. Like, I've been figuring it out all along and I had points of clarification, but this is the first time that I'm like, no, this is Jenny. Like, I'm Jenny. I'm showing up as Jenny. I don't really care what anybody else says about it. Like, everyone can have an opinion. That's the other thing too. I'm like, you can have an opinion about me. That's totally fine. You're welcome to your own opinion about me. But I know me too, and I have an opinion about me too.
You know what's really funny? I went to your LinkedIn profile and I saw the exact video that you're talking about.
I reposted it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, let's go. Oh my God. It's
Yes, and Sarah, yeah, Sarah, I heard Sarah Jessica Parker, and like her hair is blonde though. That's what she was saying. She was like, they said my hair is gray, and it's not even gray. It's like she dyes it blonde, and then
yeah.
she has a picture of her next to this younger guy, but he's gone completely gray, and she's like, but
Yeah.
nobody talks about that, you
Nope.
know?
No, and you ever see like all those posts about like, women on the red carpet, like they're being asked about like, oh, what's your outfit? How are you handling being a mom? And it's like, well, we're not asking any of the guys this. Like, and that's part of the whole like media is crafting the story, and the
Yeah,
story is always like, oh well, if you're a working mom, you don't have the support of society. You just don't. I can attest to that. No structure is set up for women to succeed professionally, like none of it. The only reason why I've gotten as far as I have is because I work from home
yeah.
and my husband stopped working for a couple of years so that I could further my career. There's the only reason
Wow,
why it worked.
amazing.
Yeah, is obviously it's actually a little bit funny because he's very machismo and
Oh
is not
no.
like so he like flipped for a little while and it was very funny for everybody. They're like, what's happening here? But honestly, that's the only I had his support and he's been great in a lot of ways with that. He took on the brunt of like we have three children. I have twin girls and a little boy. And my son was born in 2016. The twins were born in 2017. And then the pandemic happened and everybody was shut down. And, we had to make a decision. And, because my job was virtual, I was like, I'm gonna continue on. He was in construction, so he stayed with the kids. And, we just that was the only reason why it worked because I speak to women all the time now that have to leave the house to go work and they have to travel and they have to do all these things and they're going crazy because they're just society is not set up to support us. It just isn't. And we're banging down the door now, but it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time to get us to where we really need to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I think it's great. I applaud the women that are not like dyeing their hair because it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because of my genetics, I literally started graying at 25,
Oh.
but it's so like
Oh.
society says you're expiring.
That's it. You're done. That's it. It's over for you. It's a
But
wrap.
it's the worst. If I was all gray, like I would absolutely just be rocking it. But it's like a
Oh
problem
yeah.
because only like a little bit has turned
Yeah, like
gray.
little
And
patches.
so yeah, I feel
That's how
crazy.
I am too. I have like streaks of it kind of happening at this point. I thought it was like,
Yeah.
well, the other day I thought it was like a blonde highlight, and it's not at all a blonde highlight. It was a straight up gray highlight. My stepdaughter is a stylist, really great stylist. She's doing really a fabulous job with her career. And she asks me all the time whenever I go to her to get my haircut. She's like, "Do you want to color it?" And I'm like, I'm good. I'm all set. I'm like, well, also don't get me started on putting chemicals into my hair. Like I don't do that either. So I'm like,
That's smart. That's
yeah,
smart. That's
you
also,
gotta,
yeah, that's also beauty justice because I did do work educating people about the toxic chemicals and like beauty products, including like
mhm.
hair dye and like what you put on your
Oh
face and like
yeah. Oh,
it's
it's wild.
relaxing.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Well, that's like, and this is, I digress a little bit. I just learned, hold on, I have to form the whole thought. I think it was last year I did an episode on it. The relation, with uterine fibroids and black hair care.
Exactly.
Oh
Exactly.
my God.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't believe it. I also, this goes to the media that we were talking about. I also
Mhm.
couldn't believe how it didn't get any airtime. I was very upset about that because
Mhm.
I worked in women's healthcare for a while, a couple of years, and uterine fibroids was one of the things, one of the disease states that I focused in on. And I'm like, oh wow, it predominantly affects African American women. I'm like, oh wow, like I wonder why that is. Like, has anyone done any studies? Whole time that I was working on women's health, not one person ever said anything to me about that connection. And then I happened to overhear my husband was looking at something on social media and he's like just flipping. And I heard like 5 seconds of a video and I was like, oh, could you go back to that? And he went back and I was like, let me fact check that. And I started looking it up and then I did a whole episode on it because I'm like, is anyone aware? Like, does anybody know this? Because we have whole generations of women, these wonderful women, they're really strong powerhouse women that are losing their fertility because they don't know that the products that they're using to relax their hair is actually causing uterine fibroids. And you're using it from whatever age that starts all the way through adulthood. You are poisoning your whole body. And you're not even being told about it. There's no disclaimer. There's nothing on the box. It blew my mind. I was so upset about it. I was so upset when I found that out.
Exactly. So that's like some of the work that I was doing, like in the Black community in Los Angeles, was just educating about, the harm of like put the toxic relaxers, right, to
Mm-hmm.
make, curly hair or afro hair straight. How much chemicals are in there and how there are literally lawsuits right now that are
Good.
tying it to uterine fibroids and breast cancer and
Yep.
cervical cancer and
Mm-hmm.
all of the stuff, and it's crazy, but we're trying to do that, and we're trying to move towards like organic and safe, beauty products for the hair and the face. But the thing is that what we've seen is that we'll lobby a company to remove like toxins, and they will, but then they'll replace it with something that we eventually realize is also
Is also
toxic.
toxin.
Exactly. So it's and then of course, like the FDA in the US never really protected its people. It never really screened out the chemicals that it needed to. And so that's a
Yeah.
whole other thing. So it's actually like healthier to buy like skin products in like Korea or like in the
Yeah.
European, because they're actually regulated
Yeah.
like well. And
It's the
so,
craziest thing because we're sitting here in the U.S. thinking that we are protected. We're like the cream of the crop kind of a.
right.
No, we're run by industry. That's what we're run by. We're not
Yeah.
run by anything. We are run by industry, and industry is making the policy. That's really what it's boiling down to.
Exactly. And then now we have an administration that's like not even hiding it. They're like, that's their whole front, like,
I Let
whole
me tell you,
line.
if my cousin used to be my co-host on the show, and if you two got into a room together, you'd probably have a lot to say to each other because she. I always tell her, you know how you said you started blogging because she gets
Yeah.
very upset and she gets very worked up, and so I'll let her kind of go, and then I'm like, listen, we can't do anything about this in the moment. Let's
Mhm.
just You got to figure out a different way. Exactly what you did with your blog and like channeling yourself there. And I actually
Yeah.
do want to bring that back up before we disconnect that or before we hang up that you know you taking that on and using that to channel like where what your thoughts were. I think that's such a really great way to not let things be stuck in your head and rattling around in your head because then you're going to be like driving yourself crazy. But yeah, we could go down a rabbit hole for like hours talking about, honestly, like my husband and I talk about it all the time. I'm like, oh my god, did
Yeah.
you read this? I'm like, do you know we're not supposed to be eating this either? I'm like, oh my god, like it's crazy. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been such a fun conversation, by the way. I know we weren't like fun topics, but talking with you has been like I've really enjoyed it. Honestly, you show up very honestly and truthfully, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you too. Actually, it's very fun talking to you. You're like a very fun personality, a very bubbly, which I also have, so it's perfect. I'm
I know.
actually
I can
fine.
tell. I can
um,
tell.
yes,
Um, yeah. Go
yes.
ahead.
Like I was saying, because I'm like so young, I'm like not ready to have like patches of gray. So I do dye my hair, and it's hard work, and like, but I use henna, which is like a
Yeah.
natural ingredient, so it's not chemicals. So definitely recommend that to anybody listening. If you have, gray hairs and you like to dye your hair, try henna, and there's other like natural products, and they really work too. And it's long lasting for me. Like I literally only dye it, like every 6 months. But the reason is because because I have black hair, I only
Mm.
like wash my hair every week, once a week.
Yeah. Oh
And
no,
so
I'm like twice a week. I don't do it every day. That's crazy.
exactly. So it doesn't like wash out the henna, but
Yeah.
yeah, so and
That's
it's
a
only
good
like $9 at
That's
like
a good,
CVG.
honestly, that's a good solve. And I do encourage people to start looking into alternate like ways to color their hair if you really want to do that
Yeah.
because it's bad. I was dyeing my hair blonde for years. I'm like, oh
Um,
God, what have I done?
um,
Not anymore. Um, well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to link listeners. I'm going to link the book in the show notes, and I'll link any resources, Mekdela, that you want to share with the audience. If you have any websites you want to point them to, if you have a website, let me know, and we're going to link everything into your description, and that way the listeners can reach out to you and look at the materials.
awesome. Yes, I have a website, plussizebook.com, literally lowercase, all together, no spaces, plussizebook.com. You can find me on Twitter and TikTok at plussizebook. Same thing, lowercase, no spaces, at plus size book. And on Instagram, it's at mcdella.a. And on my website, there's a contact page that has all of this. I also write articles on media that I've been watching that I didn't write about in my book on Medium. So I have a Medium blog where I also share insights there. And on Medium, it's just my name, Mekdela, Mekdela. And on that note, I haven't written anything on Yellow Jackets, but one thing that's a real sell is that it has Melanie Linsky, who
Mm-hmm.
is one of my favorite actresses, and she also happens to be um, plus size, right? She happens to have like a fuller figure in a Hollywood landscape where everyone is super tiny, and she's talked about it before, and she does great work, and we love representation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And listeners, thank you for joining us to listen into the discussion. And we will catch you on the next one. So take care, everybody, and have a great day.